If I walk away, that man dies. Danielle Carter whispered the words into the rain before she even realized she had made her decision. 30 seconds earlier, she had been thinking about nothing more dramatic than finding somewhere warm to sleep. Now she stood beneath the yellow glow of a street lamp near the river, soaked through her faded jacket, watching the taillights of a black Mercedes vanish beneath dark water. The storm had turned the streets slick and nearly empty. Danielle had been walking toward an overnight shelter almost 2 miles away, carrying everything she still owned inside one worn canvas bag, when she heard tires skid across wet pavement. A black SUV had appeared behind the Mercedes. For one strange second, the two vehicles seemed almost connected, one following the other through the curtain of rain. Then the Mercedes swerved, crossed the shoulder, struck the riverside barrier, and disappeared over the edge. Danielle froze. The SUV slowed. Its headlights remained near the broken barrier for several seconds. Then it drove away. "Hey!" Danielle shouted, but the storm swallowed her voice. She looked toward the road. No pedestrians. No police. No one coming to help. Below her, the Mercedes was still visible beneath the surface, its lights glowing faintly through the black water. Danielle dropped her canvas bag. Inside were 2 shirts, an old photograph of her mother, a housekeeping uniform from the last hotel that had employed her, and the paperwork she needed for tomorrow morning's job interview. It was almost everything she had left in the world. She left it in the rain anyway. The river was brutally cold when she entered. Her breath caught, but she forced herself forward, swimming toward the fading lights. She reached the car as the roof slipped beneath the surface. Through the window, she saw a man inside. Korean, maybe late 30s, dark suit. His eyes were closed, his body motionless against the seat. Danielle pulled at the door. "Nothing. Come on," she whispered. She tried again, but the pressure held it shut. Her lungs tightened. She surfaced for air, rain striking her face, then looked back toward shore. She could still turn around. Nobody would blame a homeless woman for choosing survival. Nobody would even know she had been here. Danielle went back down. This time she found another way into the vehicle and reached the stranger. She worked quickly, freeing him from the seat and guiding him toward the surface. The man was heavier than she expected, his soaked clothes dragging against the current, but Danielle refused to release him. Inch by inch, breath by breath, she pulled him toward shore until her knees finally touched mud. She dragged him onto the wet grass and checked for breathing. "Come on, sir," she said, her voice shaking. "You're not leaving tonight." She began first aid and called for emergency help as soon as she could reach a phone nearby. Moments later, the stranger coughed and drew a weak breath. Danielle closed her eyes in relief. She had no idea his name was Adrian Kong. She had no idea men across the city lowered their voices when they spoke about him. And she certainly had no idea that pulling the Korean Mafia Boss from that sinking car had just placed her at the center of something far larger than an accident. Because while Danielle had been underwater, she had noticed one small detail inside Adrian's Mercedes that she could not explain, and whoever had sent that SUV into the storm might already know she had seen it. Danielle stayed beside Adrian until the first distant sirens began cutting through the rain, but relief lasted only a few seconds. Headlights suddenly swept across the riverbank from the opposite direction. One black sedan arrived, then another, followed by a large sport utility vehicle that stopped beside the damaged barrier. Men in dark coats stepped out with the controlled urgency of people who already knew exactly whom they were looking for. Danielle instinctively moved backward. Adrian was breathing now, weakly but steadily, and that was all she had needed to know. One of the men rushed toward him while another scanned the riverbank. "Mr. Kong." The name meant nothing to Danielle, but the fear underneath the man's voice did. She looked at the expensive vehicles, the tailored coats, and the disciplined silence surrounding them. This was not her world. Danielle had spent too many years learning when trouble was about to become someone else's version of the truth. She stepped into the darkness before anyone thought to stop her. By the time emergency responders arrived, she was already several blocks away, shivering beneath an awning and staring at her empty hands. Her canvas bag was gone. Somewhere between the river, the rain, and the confusion, everything she owned had disappeared with it. Hours later, Adrian opened his eyes beneath the soft fluorescent lights of a private hospital room. His first clear memory was not the crash. It was a voice telling him he was not leaving tonight. Victor Hahn stood near the window, his usually calm expression tightened by worry. The doctors say you were extremely fortunate. Adrian ignored the reassurance. The woman. Victor paused. What woman? Adrian turned his head slowly. The woman who pulled me out. Victor exchanged a glance with another man near the door. She was gone before we could speak with her. Adrian's eyes hardened. Find her. By sunrise, Victor's team had recovered a soaked canvas bag from beneath a bench near the river path. They brought it to Adrian after he was cleared to sit upright. The contents were ordinary enough to feel strangely intimate. 2 carefully folded shirts, an old family photograph, job interview paperwork blurred by rain, and a housekeeping uniform with a faded hotel logo. At the bottom was a plastic name badge. Danielle Carter. Adrian held it between his fingers. He had spent most of his adult life surrounded by people who calculated value before taking action. Employees wanted salaries. Rivals wanted territory. Allies wanted favors. Even loyalty usually arrived carrying an invisible invoice. Yet Danielle Carter had apparently seen a stranger trapped in freezing water and jumped in without knowing whether he possessed $10 or $10 million. Where does she live? Adrian asked. Victor looked uncomfortable. That is the problem. The address connected to her previous employment is no longer current. We checked public records and contacted the hotel. She has not had a permanent address for months. Adrian looked again at the ruined interview papers. The woman who had saved his life had nowhere reliable to sleep, and she had vanished without asking him for a single thing. Keep looking, he said quietly. Victor nodded, but Adrian's attention had shifted to the window, where morning rain traced silver lines across the glass. Somewhere in the city, Danielle was walking through that same rain without her clothes, her documents, or even the photograph she had carried so carefully. And Adrian Kong, a man accustomed to finding anyone he wanted, suddenly understood how completely the world could overlook someone who had learned to survive by being invisible. Victor found Danielle shortly after noon the next day, but not where Adrian expected. She was sitting inside a neighborhood soup kitchen on the west side, wearing a donated gray sweatshirt several sizes too large, her damp hair pulled back, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee. Through the window of the sedan, Adrian watched her slide half of her sandwich toward an elderly woman sitting alone across the table. Danielle smiled when the woman protested, then quietly pushed the plate closer. Adrian said nothing. He had left the hospital against advice less than an hour earlier, dressed in a charcoal overcoat that concealed the medical bandage near his shoulder. Victor had insisted he could handle the meeting. Adrian had refused. Some debts could not be delegated. When Danielle stepped outside 20 minutes later, she stopped immediately. Adrian stood beside the sedan beneath a pale winter sky, his posture controlled, his expression unreadable. Victor waited several feet behind him. Danielle recognized Adrian at once. You should still be in the hospital, she said. Adrian almost smiled. Of all the things she could have said, concern for him had not been what he expected. You disappeared. Danielle pulled the borrowed sweatshirt tighter against the cold. You were breathing. The ambulance was coming. My part was finished. Adrian studied her face. You saved my life. I helped someone who needed help. There is a difference. Not to me. The answer landed harder than any speech could have. Victor approached with Danielle's recovered canvas bag. Her composure changed when she saw it. She opened it quickly, ignoring the ruined clothing until her fingers found the old photograph. The picture was water-damaged but recognizable. Danielle pressed it carefully between her palms. My mother, she explained, almost apologetically. Adrian noticed that she checked the photograph before the job documents, before the uniform, before everything else. He reached inside his coat and removed an envelope. This is for what you did. Danielle looked at it, but did not reach for it. What is it? Enough to get you somewhere safe, replace what was damaged, and give you time to decide what comes next. Her eyes lifted to his. How much? Enough. Danielle gave a small shake of her head. Then no. Victor looked surprised. Adrian did not. Something about her refusal already felt inevitable. Most people would not turn this down. Most people probably need it less than I do. Then why refuse? Danielle held his gaze. The traffic moved behind them, tires whispering over wet pavement. Because I did not jump into that river so you would owe me. Adrian's expression tightened slightly. Everyone wants something. Maybe that is what people around you taught you. Her voice remained gentle. But I did not save your bank account, Mr. Kong. I saved a man. Silence settled between them. Adrian had negotiated deals worth millions without losing control of a room. Yet this homeless former maid had reduced his entire understanding of obligation to one sentence. Danielle started to walk away, then stopped. Her expression changed. There is something else. Adrian looked at her. What? Danielle glanced toward Victor, then back at Adrian. When I was inside your car, I noticed something near the driver's side floor. I did not understand it then. Adrian became completely still. Tell me. Danielle lowered her voice. I do not think what happened on that bridge was an accident. Adrian did not ask Danielle to explain herself on the sidewalk. 10 minutes later, she sat across from him inside a quiet private office above one of his legitimate businesses, her recovered canvas bag resting beside her chair. Victor stood near the window while rainwater traced thin, silver lines down the glass. Adrian placed a photograph of the Mercedes on the table. Tell me exactly what you remember. Danielle closed her eyes for a moment. She could still feel the river pressing around her, still see the dashboard lights fading beneath the black water. When I reached you, I tried the driver's door first. I looked down because my foot caught against something near the floor. There was a loose piece hanging beneath the dashboard near the pedals. I thought the crash caused it. Victor exchanged a glance with Adrian. The investigators found signs that the car had been tampered with before it reached the bridge, Victor said carefully. Danielle opened her eyes. Then there was the other vehicle. Adrian leaned forward. The black sport utility vehicle? Yes. It did not just drive away. Her voice became quieter. It stopped. The room seemed to lose its warmth. Danielle remembered standing in the rain, watching those headlights through the broken barrier. The driver stayed there for several seconds, long enough to look down toward the river. Victor opened a tablet and placed it before her. Traffic cameras had captured several dark vehicles near the bridge, but the storm had blurred license plates and softened faces into shadows. Danielle studied the images slowly. Nothing. Then Victor showed her photographs of people connected to Adrian's organization. Danielle moved through them one by one. Accountants, drivers, business partners, security personnel. Adrian watched her without speaking. Her fingers suddenly stopped. A Korean-American man in an expensive navy suit smiled from the screen, one hand resting casually in his pocket. Danielle's face lost color. Him. Victor became still. Adrian did not move at all. You are certain? Danielle looked again. I cannot tell you I saw every detail. It was raining, and he was at least 40 feet away. But when the headlights shifted, I saw his face through the windshield. I remember because he looked directly toward the water. Adrian took the tablet from her. The photograph showed Ethan Park, 39, one of the few men who had access to Adrian's travel schedule, a man who had attended family dinners, managed business accounts, and stood beside Adrian through years of difficult decisions. Ethan knew which car I was taking, Adrian said. Victor's jaw tightened. He also knew the route. Danielle looked between them. She understood enough to know that she had stepped into something dangerous, but Adrian noticed something else in her expression. Not panic. Concern. There may be another way to confirm it, Danielle said. She explained that before losing her housekeeping job, she had repeatedly seen Ethan at the luxury hotel where she worked. He never entered through the lobby. He used the private underground garage, where cameras covered every entrance. Victor immediately recognized the significance. If Ethan had used that garage on the night of the crash, the hotel might possess the missing piece of the timeline. Adrian stood. We are going there. Danielle shook her head. You can go. I told you what I know. Adrian looked at her carefully. You are the only person who can identify which entrance he used. Danielle glanced down at the faded housekeeping uniform inside her bag. Returning to that hotel meant returning to the place where she had learned exactly how invisible a person could become. After several seconds, she lifted her eyes. Fine, but I am going because I choose to. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Respect, quiet, and unmistakable. Then we go on your terms. The hotel looked exactly as Danielle remembered it, which somehow made returning worse. Warm chandeliers glowed above polished marble floors. Fresh white orchids stood beneath brass fixtures, and guests crossed the lobby carrying luggage that probably cost more than everything Danielle had owned before the storm. She stopped just inside the revolving doors. For nearly 2 years, she had entered this building through the employee entrance before sunrise, changed into a gray uniform, cleaned rooms until her hands ached, and learned how efficiently wealthy people could look through another human being. Adrian noticed her hesitation. "We can leave." Danielle looked at him. "No. I spent enough time leaving places because someone made me feel like I did not belong." She walked forward. Victor had already requested access to the hotel's security records through Adrian's business connections, but they had barely crossed the lobby when a familiar voice stopped Danielle cold. "Danielle Carter?" Claire Whitmore approached in a cream-colored suit, her expression moving from surprise to amusement. She had managed housekeeping when Danielle worked there and had perfected the ability to make cruelty sound professional. Her eyes traveled over Danielle's borrowed sweatshirt and worn shoes. "I heard you were having difficulties." Danielle kept her shoulders straight. "Hello, Claire." Claire glanced toward Adrian, clearly recognizing wealth before recognizing the man. "Are you looking for work again? Because after the way things ended, I cannot promise anything." Two employees behind the front desk looked over. Danielle felt the old humiliation returning, quiet and familiar. Claire continued, "We tried to help you, Danielle. We really did. But sleeping in the laundry room after your eviction was completely inappropriate." One employee lowered her eyes. Another exchanged an uncomfortable glance with a coworker. Danielle said nothing. She remembered that week too clearly. Her landlord had sold the building. Her savings had disappeared into motel rooms. She had worked double shifts while pretending everything was normal until exhaustion finally exposed the truth. Claire had not asked whether she was safe. She had simply told her that hotel property was not a shelter. Adrian stood several feet away, perfectly silent. Danielle looked toward him once. She had expected something from the man whose life she had saved. Not anger, not intimidation, just one sentence acknowledging what was happening. He gave her nothing. Claire mistook his silence for permission. "Some people create their own circumstances," she said softly. "You cannot expect everyone else to rescue you." Danielle's eyes steadied. "I never asked anyone to." The words changed something in Adrian's face, but he still did not intervene. Danielle turned away, swallowing the disappointment she refused to show. Then Claire made one careless mistake. "Besides, if you are here about those garage records, we cannot release private footage." Mr. Park always required discretion when he used the underground entrance. Victor's attention sharpened immediately. Adrian finally looked directly at Claire. "Mr. Park." Claire hesitated. "Ethan Park. He occasionally met clients here." "Including this week?" Victor asked. Claire realized too late that she had said too much. "I would have to check." Adrian's silence suddenly made sense. Above Claire, a small security camera reflected the chandelier light. Adrian had not been ignoring Danielle. He had been letting Claire talk, while Victor confirmed that the lobby conversation and the hotel records could establish Ethan's connection to the garage. Danielle followed Adrian's gaze toward the camera. He met her eyes for only a second, silently asking her to trust him a little longer. Claire straightened defensively. "I do not understand what any of this has to do with a former maid." Adrian finally stepped forward. His voice was calm enough to make the entire lobby seem quieter. "Then perhaps it is time you understood exactly who Danielle Carter is." Claire Whitmore's expression tightened, but Adrian did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Danielle Carter is the reason I am standing here." The words traveled across the marble lobby with more force than anger ever could. The employees behind the desk stopped moving. Claire blinked. "I am sorry." Adrian's eyes remained steady. "2 nights ago, my car went into the river during the storm. Danielle saw it happen. She entered freezing water, pulled me to shore, and stayed until I could breathe again." Claire looked at Danielle as if seeing her for the first time. "She did that." "She did," Adrian said. "Then she disappeared without asking my name, my position, or what I could give her." Danielle felt every eye in the lobby turn toward her, but Adrian was not finished. "So when you describe her circumstances as though hardship were evidence of character, understand that the woman you dismissed had more courage on one rainy night than most people demonstrate in a lifetime." The lobby went silent. Claire's confidence faded. "I did not know." Danielle finally spoke. "That was always the problem, Claire. You never wanted to know." Her voice carried no bitterness, only exhaustion. Adrian looked at her, and for the first time Danielle understood why he had remained quiet earlier. He had allowed Claire to reveal herself, but he had also allowed Danielle the dignity of answering for herself. Victor approached with his phone in hand. "We have confirmation. The hotel's security director located the garage archive. Claire turned toward him. You cannot just access private records. We requested that the hotel preserve relevant footage for the authorities, Victor replied. Your comment gave us the date range and entrance to identify. Minutes later, they were escorted into a small security office behind the lobby. Rows of monitors cast pale blue light across the walls. Danielle stood behind the technician as footage from the night of the storm appeared. At 9:47 in the evening, a black sport utility vehicle entered the underground garage. The image sharpened as it passed beneath a ceiling camera. Danielle leaned closer. Her breathing slowed. Ethan Park stepped from the driver's side. He wore the same navy coat Danielle remembered beneath the bridge lights. Adrian's face became unreadable. The footage continued. Ethan entered the hotel through a private elevator. 38 minutes later, he returned to the garage carrying a small document envelope. He drove out less than an hour before Adrian's Mercedes reached the bridge. Victor checked another record and looked at Adrian. The vehicle matches the make and model captured by the traffic camera. Danielle felt cold despite the heated room. So I was right. Adrian stared at the frozen image of a man he had trusted for years. You remembered what everyone else missed. Danielle shook her head. I only noticed because nobody notices people like me. When you spend years cleaning rooms and standing behind wealthy guests, you learn to see things without being seen. Adrian turned toward her. The sentence seemed to strike somewhere deeper than she intended. His world had trained him to watch threats. Hers had trained her to survive invisibility. Both skills had brought them to the same room. Victor's phone suddenly vibrated. He read the message, and the color drained from his face. Adrian, there is a problem. Adrian looked at him. Victor turned the screen around. Ethan Park had checked out of his apartment less than 20 minutes earlier. Before leaving, he had made one call to the hotel. Adrian's gaze moved immediately to Danielle. Ethan knew she had come back. For the first time since Danielle had met him, Adrian looked afraid, and the fear was not for himself. We are leaving, he said. Danielle heard the finality in his voice. Where? Somewhere Ethan cannot reach you. That sounds like hiding. Adrian turned toward her. It sounds like keeping you safe. Danielle picked up her canvas bag. There is a difference between keeping someone safe and deciding their life for them. Victor glanced toward the door, clearly anxious to move, but Adrian remained still. Danielle continued. 2 days ago, nobody knew where I slept. Yesterday, nobody cared. Now suddenly everyone wants to decide where I go because I saw something important. Her voice softened. I am tired of disappearing. Adrian understood the words better than she expected. His instinct was control. Control the room. Control the risk. Control every uncertain variable until nothing could surprise him. Danielle was asking him to do something far more difficult. Trust her. Then tell me what you want, he said. Danielle looked toward the security monitor where Ethan's image remained frozen. I want the truth recorded somewhere he cannot erase it. Within the hour, Victor arranged for Danielle to give a formal statement to investigators handling the crash. Copies of the hotel footage were preserved, traffic records were secured, and Danielle described everything she remembered from the bridge. She refused special treatment. She refused to be rushed. Most importantly, she refused to be invisible. By late afternoon, Adrian accompanied her out through the hotel lobby. Claire stood near the front desk, but said nothing. Danielle did not look away this time. Outside, cold sunlight had replaced the rain. A sedan waited at the curb. Before Danielle reached it, Victor's phone rang. He listened for several seconds, then stepped closer to Adrian. Ethan knows she gave a statement. Adrian's expression hardened. How? We do not know yet. Danielle felt the old instinct telling her to run, but she remained where she was. Adrian opened the car door. Danielle, please. It was the first time she had heard him use that word. She got inside, not because he commanded her, but because she understood the danger had changed. They drove toward a secure apartment Adrian maintained downtown. Halfway there, Danielle noticed the same dark sedan behind them through 3 consecutive turns. Victor, she said quietly. He checked the mirror. The vehicle stayed several car lengths back. The driver did not approach. He did not need to. His presence carried the message. Adrian immediately called the authorities already involved in the investigation and directed his driver toward a busy police station rather than the apartment. The dark sedan turned away 2 blocks before they arrived. No confrontation followed. None was necessary. Danielle stared through the window as it disappeared into traffic. He wants me scared. Adrian looked at her. Are you? Danielle considered the question. Yes. Her honesty surprised him. But being afraid is not the same as surrendering. That evening, she stood beside the window of the secure apartment, looking down at thousands of lights scattered across the city. Adrian remained near the doorway, giving her space. You can still walk away from this, he said. Danielle turned. And spend the rest of my life wondering whether someone else ended up in that river because I stayed quiet? Adrian had no answer. Danielle placed her recovered photograph of her mother on the table. I spent too long being invisible, Mr. Kong. I am done. Adrian looked at the woman who owned almost nothing yet refused to surrender the one thing no money could purchase for her, her voice. In that moment, his concern changed into something deeper than gratitude. Respect. And across the city, Ethan Park was discovering that the witness he had expected to frighten into silence had finally decided she would never disappear again. Morning arrived without sleep. Danielle sat at the kitchen counter with her mother's photograph beside a cooling cup of coffee while Adrian stood near the window, watching the city wake beneath a gray sky. At 7:15, Victor entered carrying news that changed everything. Ethan had contacted an attorney and agreed to meet investigators after learning that copies of the hotel footage and Danielle's statement had already been secured. He cannot make the evidence disappear now, Victor said. Adrian remained silent. For years, men who betrayed him had expected consequences delivered according to the rules of his world, rules built on fear, loyalty, and private judgment. Part of him still wanted that certainty. Then he looked at Danielle. She had entered freezing water to save a stranger without asking whether he deserved saving. Adrian suddenly understood that what he chose next would reveal whether anything inside him had actually changed. Give everything to the investigators, he said. Victor studied him. Everything. The traffic records, hotel footage, vehicle inspection, communications. All of it. Victor nodded slowly. Danielle watched Adrian carefully. And Ethan? Adrian's jaw tightened. He answers for what he did through the legal process. The decision seemed simple when spoken aloud, yet Danielle recognized its weight. Adrian was choosing accountability over retaliation, evidence over fear. By noon, investigators had enough information to move forward. Ethan surrendered through his attorney and was taken into custody without confrontation. The city continued moving as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Buses rolled through intersections. Office workers carried coffee beneath winter coats. Somewhere, hotel rooms were being cleaned by people most guests would never remember. Danielle stood beside Adrian in a quiet office, while Victor confirmed that the immediate threat had passed. It is over, Adrian said. Danielle shook her head gently. For you, maybe. He looked at her. What do you mean? She glanced at her canvas bag on the chair. I still do not have a home. I still missed my interview. Tomorrow morning, I am still Danielle Carter. Adrian finally understood. He had been thinking like a powerful man again, imagining that solving the largest problem automatically solved every smaller one. Tell me what you need. Danielle smiled faintly. Not what you think I need. I am learning. She considered him for a moment. I need somewhere temporary while I get back on my feet. I need replacement identification. And I need another chance at that interview. Adrian reached for his phone, then stopped himself. May I help arrange those things? The question surprised her more than any expensive offer could have. Yes. That afternoon, Victor helped Danielle contact the appropriate offices for replacement documents and reach the employer whose interview she had missed. Adrian offered no mansion, no blank check, no condition disguised as generosity. He simply opened doors Danielle chose to walk through herself. Before leaving the office, she turned back. You know you do not owe me your life. Adrian met her eyes. Maybe not. Then stop trying to repay me. He was quiet. What should I do instead? Danielle looked through the window at the city below. Remember what it felt like when you could not save yourself. Adrian understood. The river had stripped away his money, his reputation, his control. For a few desperate minutes, he had been nothing more than a human being who needed another human being. Danielle had never asked whether he was important. Now, when he looked at the woman the world had repeatedly overlooked, he finally understood that dignity was not something powerful people gave to others. It was something they were obligated to recognize. 3 months later, Danielle Carter stood beside the window of a small apartment that belonged to no shelter, no hotel, and no generous stranger. It belonged to her, at least for the 12 months written clearly on the lease she had signed with her own name. Morning sunlight warmed the hardwood floor. Her mother's photograph rested inside a simple wooden frame on the kitchen counter, carefully restored after the storm. Beside it sat an employee badge from her new job with a property management company, where Danielle had started as a housekeeping coordinator and quickly earned the trust of people who valued what she noticed, what she remembered, and how she treated others. Adrian had kept his promise in the only way Danielle had allowed. He had helped replace what the river destroyed, connected her with the offices she needed, and then stepped back. No mansion, no extravagant gifts, no invisible debt. Ethan's case continued through the legal system, supported by the evidence Danielle had helped preserve. Claire Whitmore had sent Danielle an apology several weeks earlier. Danielle read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness, she had learned, did not require returning to places that had taught you to feel small. On a cold Saturday evening, Adrian arrived outside Danielle's building without an entourage. He wore a dark wool coat, but something about him seemed different now. Less guarded, less interested in controlling every silence. "There is somewhere I would like to go," he said. Danielle studied him. "Is that a request?" A faint smile touched his face. "I am learning." 20 minutes later, they stood near the river. The damaged barrier had been replaced. Traffic moved steadily behind them, and the water below reflected the amber lights of the city. Danielle rested her hands inside her coat pockets. Adrian looked toward the place where his car had disappeared. "I remember almost nothing about going into the water," he said, "but I remember your voice." Danielle smiled slightly. "I was mostly telling you to breathe. You were very demanding. You were being difficult." For a moment, they laughed, and the river became only a river again. Then Adrian grew quiet. "There is something I never asked you." Danielle turned toward him. "Why did you jump?" She looked down at the dark water. "Because you were drowning. You did not know who I was. That was the point." Adrian studied her face. Danielle continued softly. "If I had known you were powerful, it should not have made your life worth more. If you had been broke, frightened, sleeping in a shelter, it should not have made your life worth less." The words settled between them. Adrian looked back toward the river, remembering how helpless he had been beneath that water. For all his money and influence, none of it had mattered when he could not breathe. Only the hand of a woman the world had overlooked had mattered. "You saved more than my life," he said. Danielle shook her head. "I gave you a chance. What you did with it was your choice." Adrian nodded slowly. That distinction meant everything. 3 months earlier, he had believed power meant never needing anyone. Danielle had believed survival meant never expecting anyone to see her. Both had been wrong. She had pulled him from the water, but he had refused to turn gratitude into ownership. He had learned to offer help without taking away choice, and Danielle had learned that accepting a hand did not mean surrendering her dignity. They stood beside the river until the city lights brightened around them. Adrian finally understood what Danielle had known before she ever learned his name. A human life does not become worthy when someone discovers its status, wealth, or usefulness. It was worthy all along. And on that quiet riverbank, the man she once pulled from the darkness finally understood what dignity looked like.